Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to another edition of the Scott Hamilton Show, and we are on the precipice of the college football playoff championship game down in Miami. I'm excited. I'm excited and I'm sad because I'm excited because obviously it's a fantastic matchup, one nobody saw coming. But I'm sad also because it's the end of another college football season and we have to wait, 7 months before it starts again. And of course, we discuss it year round, 365 days a year, but it's not the same. And what will be the narratives going forward? That's something we're going to explore over the next few weeks. What are going to be some of the topics? I mean, obviously, we're going to continue to talk about NIL and the transfer portal. Will they adjust the calendar? But what else can pop up? If we've learned one thing over the past few years, it's that be ready for something that we haven't thought about to manifest and change the direction of the game or impact the game. How about that? In college sports in general, not just football, but specifically football. What will that topic be over the next few months? Will we teeter more towards collective bargaining and they organize and the athletes actually become employees? Will there be a shift in leadership or maybe a creation of leadership? Will we finally get a commissioner of college football? I doubt it, but nothing is off the table given how things have developed so radically over the last few years. The deadline is fast approaching on the 2026 college football playoffs, 2026-27. You get what I'm saying. It's for the 2026 season. Will it expand? Will the format change? Yada, yada, yada. We'll find out soon. Right now, though, we have a 12-team playoff that is whittled down to two teams, Indiana and Miami. Indiana, 8.5-point favorite right now, according to DraftKings. You're an 8.5-point favorite in the national title game when you beat Alabama and you beat Oregon by a combined 97-25. This Alabama team is special. Now, it can lose. Miami made it, obviously, by virtue of being a good team itself. Its defense is really good, very physical, very fast, and very motivated. But Indiana doesn't beat itself. Indiana knows who it is, what its plan is, and Indiana has an advantage at quarterback, as well as Carson Beck has played in these playoffs. Mendoza, he's different, man. He's just wired different, and no stage is too big for that guy. It's an incredible story. It is an absolutely incredible story, and it doesn't happen without the transfer portal. It doesn't. What's his legacy amongst the all-time greats of college football if Indiana beats Miami? He's already won a Heisman Trophy. He's already part of what I guess we can call the most magical season in college football history, win or lose. Can we say that? Do you have to have a championship to have that claim, to be able to lay that claim as the most magical season in the history of college football? I mean, they're trying to juxtapose it to Yale in 1894 and all this stuff. I mean, when you have to go back that far, you're the real deal. It's incredible what they've done. I'm excited. I'm sad and I'm excited. I'm also excited for college basketball. And as an AP Top 25 voter, and I think there are like 61 of us, 62 of us, we have to do our ballots each week, and we submit them on Monday mornings. And it's hard, man. I do football too, but basketball is so much more difficult because there's 3 times as many teams, and they play 3 times as many games. It's a lot to keep up with. But once you get into a rhythm and once you start getting the lay of the land, it's not as arduous. And it actually becomes really enjoyable. Not everybody likes it, but I enjoy doing it. And one of the things I'm having a hard time reconciling right now is who's actually the number one team in the country. Who is it? You could throw any number of teams into a hat of about a group of about 7, we'll say, maybe 8. And you could stick one of them at the top spot and you wouldn't get a whole lot of pushback. Honest to goodness, you wouldn't get a whole lot of pushback. And that's happened this year. We've had some rotation at the number one spot. And again, it doesn't matter really. I mean, all that matters is how the NCAA tournament selection committee seeds things. But it's still a fun talking point, and it's something that goes into those rooms when they set the bracket in March. Arizona is my number one team right now. But I have Iowa State second. Iowa State's lost twice this week. So that's going to change, but yet I still think Iowa State's one of the best in the country. This is one of the dilemmas, for lack of a better word, we're going to discuss with David Cobb of CBS Sports. He's going to join us in a few moments. And I want to get his take on who is the best team in the country, what is the best team in the country, and get his take on the state of college basketball in general. I also want to dive deep into some games. There were 3 games on Saturday that held my attention. 3. And for different reasons. We had Kentucky with yet another comeback, this time winning at Tennessee, beating a ranked team on the road, which they have to do from here on out. They have to win. They have to upset people. They have to upset them on the road. They've got to, or they're not going to make the postseason. How are they able to flip the switch from looking so terrible in the first half to just tremendous in the second half? And then what's ailing North Carolina? North Carolina's defense has vanished. Absolutely atrocious on this recent two-loss West Coast swing at Stanford and then at Cal on Saturday. And how hot's the seat for Hubert Davis? And the flip side to all this, though, and we're talking about the mercurial nature of Kentucky and North Carolina, just the steadiness of Clemson. The steadiness of Brad Brownell doing Brad Brownell things. Clemson won again on Saturday, this time beating Miami. And a sold-out crowd, by the way, at Little John Coliseum for a basketball game against Miami, this time 69-59. Clemson remaining undefeated. Undefeated in the ACC. I'm looking at the standings now. 6-0, tied with Duke for first place. Won 9 in a row. Undefeated at home, 10-0. Just winning games. They've got NC State on Tuesday. I mean, a really, really nice stretch here. NC State at Georgia Tech and then Pittsburgh to close out January before going to Stanford, going to Cal. Okay, again, as North Carolina will attest, that can be a pretty difficult 2-game swing. But Clemson's set up to be in a really good position, 16-3 right now, before playing Duke on Valentine's Day. And then Wake Forest the following Wednesday. What does it all mean? Can they continue this trajectory? I think so. If Brad Brownell's anything, he's steady. He's so steady. And when you look at the 3 losses, that early loss to Georgetown, at Georgetown, 79-74 on November 15th, those things are going to happen early in the season. They are. But you look at the other 2, and these are the ones that really have to give Clemson people heartburn. The 90-84 loss at Alabama on December 3rd, that was a game that Clemson very well could have won. Played magnificent for long stretches of the game. And Alabama's a good team, ranked team. And then the BYU, and they probably don't want to relive that one, that 67-64 loss. Clemson blew big lead in that one. 22 points they led that game at Madison Square Garden. How is the national media addressing Clemson if they win those 2 games? How are they looking at them through a different lens? I have to think their resume come March would be way different, but what's done is done. What's it look like now going forward? Those are all things we're going to ask David Cobb of CBS Sports when he joins us, get his take on the state of college basketball, who's the best team, get his take on the ACC. ACC has flipped the script this year. Flipped the script, closed the gap with the SEC. We'll discuss that with David Cobb and a whole lot more. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Sports fans, it's time to gear up. Head to fanstreamsports.com and check out our brand new merchandise store. We're talking bold t-shirts, 3/4 zips, hoodies, hats, mugs, and more. Everything you need to rep your favorite shows and your favorite crew. Whether you're rolling with the JP Peterson Show in Tampa Bay, From the Rough in Dallas, the Tim May Show featuring Clay Hall, or the Jeff Thidoff Show in Ohio, or any of our fans FanStream Sports original programming, we've got the perfect look for game day and every day. So don't wait. FanStreamSports.com. Click merch and grab your gear now. Wear the stream, live the stream. FanStreamSports.com.
Welcome back. Again, another just fantastic weekend of college basketball. Really across the board, every conference looking pretty strong, mid-majors looking good. Five teams entered the week undefeated, 3 remain undefeated, and a couple of them I would never have expected because I don't consider them to be basketball schools, but I think that says a lot about the depth of college basketball in this age of NIL, transfer portal, and all that. Some of the blue bloods are having problems. Let's dive into this. We've got an excellent guest. It's our friend David Cobb from CBS Sports, kind enough to join us. And David, I look at it when it comes time to do my top 25 ballot, and I really could throw any number of about 6 or 7 teams onto the table and grab them at random, and that could be numbers 1 through 7. Arizona, UConn, Michigan, Purdue, Houston, and even Iowa State, which has now had a couple of losses. In your estimation, how heavy is the top of college basketball right now, and who would you have, say, numbers 1 through 4?
Yeah, it's solid at the top. A bit of fluctuation, though, over the last week. You mentioned Iowa State dropping a couple of games, and Arizona just keeps on winning. And to me, they would be number 1 right now if I had a ballot. Now, granted, in our bracketology projection, we still have Michigan narrowly as the number 1 overall seed. Personally, if I were on the committee, I would rank it with Arizona at number 1 overall. I mean, you just think about the quality of victories they have, the fact that they're still unbeaten. I mean, they beat UConn and Florida in non-conference. So they have victories over the last 3 national champions there. UConn winning 2 of them, Florida winning 1 of them. And then, they've beaten Alabama. They've beaten a really good UCF team, several other victories over teams that are currently bubble teams. And they're a complete squad too. I mean, this is Tommy Lloyd's best defensive team that he's had. But they have a variety of ways they can hurt you on the offensive end too. So Arizona, Michigan, to me, are kind of like tier 1A, and then tier 1B right there nipping at their heels, Duke, UConn, Purdue. So it's pretty strong at the top. And, we're probably not done with the revolving door at number 1. I mean, the Big 12 is tough enough to where Arizona's going to get tripped up here at some point. And when they do the voters slide Duke in there? Do they slide Michigan back up there? Where's UConn at? Could they get back in the mix? So, it is going to be a pretty interesting battle here down the stretch to see who gets those number 1 seeds, who ends up number 1 in the AP poll when it's all said and done, because there is some really quality basketball being played at the top.
It's appropriate, I guess, to bring this up. One of the things I grapple with, and maybe you can help me get myself lined out, one of the things I grapple with is head-to-head in college basketball, because I feel like it's a little different in college basketball head-to-head when you're looking at a game that happened in November or even December, and you come around to March and it's time to figure out who's going to go to the postseason, because you've had so much happen since then in the end of the regular season and the conference tournaments. Different than football because you have a much smaller sample size. How much stock do you put into head-to-head matchups at this point? I know it's only January 18th, but when you're looking at the rankings and you see, and I'm sorry, David, I had an example, but I forgot it. You see a team that beat another team, but the team that lost has like half as many defeats. How do you reconcile that?
Well, we've actually had that exact conversation today over at CBS Sports about who's going to be one of the last teams in our current NCAA field. And it's UCLA versus Ohio State. Well, most metrics would slightly favor UCLA. However, Ohio State beat them yesterday head-to-head, and there's really not that much separating them. So in that scenario, if it's essentially 2 teams that are basically even or close to even, then I think you give the edge to the team with the head-to-head win, especially when it's so recent and the margins between the teams are so small. But it gets really tricky when come Selection Sunday, you're trying to factor in a head-to-head result from, let's say, the Players Era Festival in November. Well, 3.5 months have transpired. You've had injuries. Teams have evolved and grown since then. So it is hard to put too much stock into it. but it's a very pertinent conversation because, you reference college football. How different right now is the CFP conversation if Miami's head-to-head victory over Notre Dame isn't valued the way that it is? It'd be a totally different matchup, right? So it's definitely a factor when you're splitting hairs and you're breaking ties. But you use the term sample size. I think that's key because in college basketball you have a 30 plus game sample size to work with, and hopefully within that sample size there's enough differentiation between teams to where you don't have to rely on head to head. But at the end of the day, it is a nice tie breaking mechanism that you can use.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I started off this segment by mentioning the week began with 5 undefeated teams in Division I. Now they're down to 3. One of them is Arizona, not a shocker. Miami of Ohio, which is a mid-major MAC. That's very doable. I could see that happening. But Nebraska, how did we get to this point where Nebraska in a Power 4 conference, Big Ten, how did we get to this point where Nebraska is having one of the best seasons in its history?
Yeah, it's a very fair question, Scott. Nebraska is the story of college basketball right now. If you're looking at a team, right, like obviously there's a lot of stud freshman players who are really interesting, and there's plenty of other good stories. But in terms of a singular team that is the story of college basketball right now, it's Nebraska. This is a program that's never won an NCAA tournament game before. Yes, they've never won an NCAA tournament game, and yet here they are next to Arizona as the last unbeaten high major team. And really, it's crazy because there just wasn't a whole lot expected of Nebraska this year. In fact, I think you could say a bad season could have been really bad for Fred Hoiberg. Like, he's done some good things there and gotten them to the tournament, but hadn't really gotten them over the hump. And they've had some down years mixed in there too. So he's done an unbelievable job. And to a certain extent, they're like the basketball version of Indiana football. Just a Big Ten team with very little history in the sport, coming out of nowhere, taking everybody by surprise. And every time you want to count them out, they keep finding ways to win. Now, over the long haul, like the predictive analytics don't love Nebraska. They don't rate them as a top 10 team. So, they're going to take some losses in the Big Ten. I have no doubt, right? But even if they do, you're talking about potentially the best, the highest NCAA tournament seed in program history. And if you can hang on and be a 3 or a 4 or a 5 seed, that positions you really well against a 12, a 13, a 14 to go out there and do something that's never been done before in that program's history and win a game in the big dance.
And David, just a couple more minutes, please. But again, there was a lot of fantastic basketball played on Saturday, but there were 3 games in particular that got my attention. And I think it says a lot, not only about the state of those individual programs, but the state of college basketball at large. And if we could take a moment to just discuss each of those games. First of all, Kentucky. They've already given the name Comeback Cats to a previous UK team from back in the day. I think that was Tubby's team in '98 were the Comeback Cats. But they did it again. This time they rallied at Tennessee, number 24 Tennessee, 80-78. They were down 17, man. They were down 17 late in the first half, and it looked like this team was finally going to fold because they had the comeback win the other night. I think it was against Missouri at home.
So they actually lost Missouri at home, but they were down 12. They were down 12 against Mississippi State. Came back and won that. And then they were down 18 against LSU and came back and won that game too.
At LSU.
Right.
So what's going on? This is a roster that was purported to cost $23 million. They're playing lights out in the second half, but apparently there's a disconnect going into the game. I'm wondering this, and you cover basketball as well as anybody in the country. It seems to me to be a coaching thing because the onus is on the coach to have the team prepared to start the game. Is that where they're falling flat? Because then, that makes me criticize Mark Pope, but I also want to show him grace because apparently he makes the most incredible in-game, adjustments at halftime that we've seen in a long time. How do you size this up?
Well, that magical in-game adjustment at halftime is basically, okay, Denzel Aberdeen, you're going to play the entire second half and hopefully make all of your shots, because that's been the impetus behind their last 2 big comeback wins is him playing out of his mind. And Otagoue being right there with him in the second half. But honestly, those are your two guys, your two stud guards who you were counting on going into the season. Now that you don't have Jalen Lowe, who's out for the year, Jaden Quaintance has suffered a setback here with his knee. Your Mark Pope, you're still trying to figure out your starting lineup. So that's part of the slow starts. Is it's been a revolving door in the starting five, and now they've started trotting Yelovich out there after he'd been on the bench for a while, and he's starting and playing okay. But every game I think brings its own set of challenges for this Kentucky team, because what worked for Kentucky against LSU in the second half did not work in the first half against Tennessee. Tennessee is a much bigger team, a much better rebounding team. And therefore, after pretty much keeping Mo Diabate on the bench for 2 games, Mark Pope had to ride him in the second half so that Kentucky could actually compete on the glass. And when they did that, they started getting second chance points. And Kentucky attempted 14 more shots from the floor in the second half than Tennessee did. That's incredible. And that's because, one, they were actually getting rebounds. And 2, they didn't turn the ball over in the second half, which when you don't have your point guard, that's pretty impressive. So it's the problem with Kentucky is that there is no singular answer. Mark Pope has to find the answers every game, which is you're putting a puzzle on together on the fly, while parachuting out of an airplane, basically. And that's what they're doing. They're playing a game of Tetris at warp speed, trying to figure out what's going to work in a given game. And I mean, to their credit, they've been figuring it out here as of late. But it's obviously a Kentucky team that still has a lot of flaws.
It's very flawed, and I have 2 thoughts on that before we move on to the next topic. I'm a Diabate guy. I think he is a fantastic player. I question some of Mark Pope's rotations, but again, he's trying to put that puzzle together. But when he seems to have the puzzle fitting, then he decides to break it up again. I mean, Colin Chandler has had a wonderful week. He made some really key plays over the past week, but then he'll pull him at random moments. Now, he didn't do it so much yesterday, so good on Mark Pope for that. And also good on Mark Pope because the team is performing under incredible pressure because, let's face it, David, they are on the cusp of missing the NCAA tournament. They're going to have to upset people. They're going to have to upset people on the road like they did yesterday. Good on them for winning under these conditions, but there's going to come a point where you can't put yourself in that situation and expect to pull it out. Don't get me started on UK. Let's move on to the next one. North Carolina, disastrous West Coast swing, 95-90 loss to Stanford at Stanford. You're giving up 95 points. That in and of itself is concerning. And then what happened across the road over at Cal Berkeley, 84-78. How dire are things right now in Chapel Hill? What do you think the pressure is, the hot seat level is right now for the coaching staff, and what can UNC do to reverse this?
Yeah, right now the problems are primarily on the defensive side of the ball. This is now 5 straight games in which the opponent has made 12 or more threes. That's horrendous perimeter defense. And what's so concerning is that it wasn't this bad for the first half of the season. First 13 games of the year, only one team hit 12 threes against North Carolina. Now it's happened 5 consecutive games. Something's broken there defensively, and Hubert Davis needs to get a pulse on what that is, or absolutely, yes, the hot seat talk will quickly heat up and accelerate around there, because this is a talented roster. When you have Caleb Wilson, who could be the highest North Carolina draft pick in years on your team, and you have a veteran cog like Seth Trimble back and healthy, and Derek Dixon's shown you a lot and given you something to be encouraged by, and maybe a potential building block for the future there. And then, I mean, Henry Visar's been pretty good for a guy coming over from Arizona, playing a lot more minutes than he did at Arizona. I mean, there is talent on this North Carolina team. Maybe not a ton of depth, quality depth, but there's enough here to where the results should be better than what they are. And until they figure things out defensively, first and foremost, it's going to be a rocky ride, because the ACC is a tougher league this year than it was a year ago by a significant margin. And you can't just trot out there and win some of these games. And the Cal and Stanford West Coast trip is the perfect illustration of that. And so you go 0-2 out there, you got to come back and really get to it, because, we're 1 or 2 more losses away here from an uncomfortable conversation around, North Carolina maybe slipping towards bubble territory. I mean, we're not there yet, but you can't keep playing like this and avoid that conversation.
I'm glad you mentioned the ACC, the strength of the ACC, and how it's picked itself up. Two thoughts on that. One, with regards to the ACC as a whole, who do you have right now as maybe the player of the year, or at least the newcomer of the year in the ACC? Are you leaning towards Caleb Wilson, or are you a Cam Boozer guy? 30 points, 14 rebounds against Stanford on Saturday.
Yeah, it's take your pick. There's a lot of talent in the league. It's so refreshing. Like even though he didn't have his best game against Duke on Saturday, like the Stanford freshman Abuka Akori, this guy was not even a top 100 prospect in the class of 2025, and yet here he is neck and neck with Cam Boozer for leading scorer in the ACC, and looking like he belongs in that same conversation with Caleb Wilson and some of the other stars in this conference who have really bolstered the league this year. You look at like a Shelton Henderson at Miami, and I mean the list is deeper. If you want to look at the international guys like Tice the Ritter that has helped Virginia turn things around, like such a great infusion of talent. But then also the league has been energized by its first year coaches. You think about Ryan Odom getting Virginia back to relevancy immediately in year one. NC State suffered a bad loss over the weekend, but they've at least got some life to them now under Will Wade. And then Jay Lucas at Miami has done an amazing job there, taking over for Jim Larinaga and getting Miami to a point where they look like an NCAA tournament team. So, and that's to say nothing of your more steady teams like a Clemson under Brad Brownell, who's right back there in a good place. So, best player in the league is got to be Cam Boozer right now. But that first team All ACC team is going to be stacked. Cam Boozer might be the national player of the year.
Yeah.
The way he's playing, he's that good. I had a chance to see him in person at Louisville a little over a week ago, and man, he may not be like jumping out of the gym, just throwing down windmill dunks on people, but he is so smart, so good, such a high basketball IQ, and so versatile in the things that he can do for you, especially on offense.
He makes me feel really old because I covered the entirety of his father's career.
Right,
Dude,
I remember it well. Yeah,
you remember it well. I was sitting courtside. I was at Cole Fieldhouse in Maryland one night. Duke was playing at Maryland. We were covering that game, and I remember Maryland fans throwing family on Carlos Boozer, or throwing stuff on Carlos Boozer's family, like bottles and popcorn and garbage and stuff on them at Cole Fieldhouse. And that was 25 years ago, David.
Yeah, and Carlos is ever present at all these Duke games now, and it is crazy, right? Like, I remember this guy as a player. Now his son's a potential, top 5 pick. It's wild.
Well, and I always wondered how. I mean, he ended up having a fantastic NBA career, Carlos Boozer. I always wondered what kind of college success he would have had he been at a different program, because he was on such a loaded Duke team. Jay Williams, Shane Battier for his first couple of years. They had him, Mike Dunleavy Jr. I mean, you could go on and on and on. Carlos Boozer was so incredibly talented. I always felt like if he had gone to another program and could have been the guy, that he would have really, really been a superstar above even what he was in college. Last topic, David, and I promise to let you go. You mentioned Clemson. You mentioned Brad Brownell. Clemson's won 9 in a row, and the 3 losses they've had this year by a total of 11 points. BYU, where they blew a lead at Madison Square Garden. Alabama, a highly ranked team, and then Georgetown early in the season. I saw Clemson play earlier this year in the Charleston Classic. I was very impressed by the depth of this team and just how well-rounded it is. What is the ceiling in your estimation for this Clemson team as the closer we get to the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's clearly emerging as a potential second weekend team in the NCAA tournament. Now, do they have the superstar talent and elite playmaking on offense that you need to make that glorious Final Four breakthrough? I mean, probably not. But given what was expected of Clemson, I mean, this team is overperforming and doing so in a pretty significant way. I mean, hand up, I was lower on Clemson going into this season than I've been on Clemson in a long time. I mean, without Ian Schifflin and kind of moving on from that Schifflin, PJ Hall era, it just kind of felt like this was going to be a totally new team. And it kind of is for the most part. But the thing that Brad Brownell did is he pursued veteran players in the transfer portal. So they are old. That helps, and they're deep, and they play really good defense. And when you're old and you're deep and you play really good defense, you're going to have a pretty high floor. And so I just kind of overlooked some of that because when I was looking at Clemson's roster before the season, I was like, man, I don't see any all ACC players on here. I don't see any future NBA draft picks on this roster. I just was a little lukewarm on them, and they've proven me wrong by being a group whose whole is greater than the sum of their parts. And so I think you nailed it. The depth is big for Clemson basketball, and then Brad Brownell, just steady as they come. He is an underrated college basketball coach who's done a really good job at a non-basketball school for quite a while now, and deserves some recognition nationally for the job that he's doing this season.
It's not apples to apples, but if you'll just indulge me for one more minute, it's almost like he's a basketball version of Kurt Signetti. The portal and all of that has really helped him be his best coach because he can identify talent for what he does and what he wants from his players. He doesn't need a 5-star, but you give him enough 3 stars, he can put together this product. You understand what I'm saying? It's really allowing Brad to leverage his abilities to assemble a team as he sees it.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're going to defend like they defend, you got to have some depth because it takes a lot out of you. And then you got to have older guys who are just willing to buy into that too. And grateful for the shot to play in the ACC. I mean, that's part of it too. And knowing sort of what you're looking for when you go out into the portal and having a good in-house sort of structure so that you know what your portal priorities are. I think that's where a lot of the missteps happen in college basketball. These programs, they just blindly pursue points per game or the counting stats or the guy whose name they recognize from when they recruited him out of high school 4 years ago. But what you do or what you neglect when you go down that path is a really nuanced look at what you want to be from an identity standpoint, and then finding guys who fit that. I mean, I think that's the name of the game. So much of college basketball now is having that sort of front office, whether that's an actual GM, whether it's having a personnel-minded assistant coach who leads the charge, however you want to create that culture of knowing what you prioritize and finding the players who fit it. Like that's the path to success now. And Clemson did a really good job with that in IDing the players who one, they could afford, and two, who could fit what they want to do. And now they're reaping the benefits of that. And again, I still don't know that they're going to have an all conference player, for certainly not on the first team, coming out of the season. That's okay though. They're going to be there on Selection Sunday as an at-large team with a chance to match what some of their other recent teams have done in terms of being some of the best to do it at Clemson.
He's one of the best in the business. David Cobb, we appreciate you coming on today, brother.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent segment with David Cobb, our friend from CBS Sports. Just always wonderful insight. And I like our discussion about Clemson because it is my estimation, and I've said this before, that the transfer portal is the best thing to happen to Clemson basketball ever. It really is. I think it's the best thing to happen to college basketball since the shot clock, and I mean that. It's allowing parity to really take place. It truly is. And then you get a guy like a Brad Brownell who knows who he is, he knows what he wants to do, and he knows what he needs to achieve it. And as David Cobb, our friend from CBS Sports, said, he's not just going out and chasing points in the portal, not just going out and chasing numbers. He is looking for very specific skill sets and mindsets that can plug into his culture and his system. And they're the same. They're one and the same, not one above the other. And that's why we've seen his career and the program in itself take a steeper trajectory over the last 3 or 4 years since the portal became a thing. He's gone out, and as Dave said, he's gone out and gotten older. And when we've seen in the last few years, and when it comes to college basketball, that the older teams are the ones who have the most success when it really counts, i.e. the NCAA tournament and the national championship. And I'm not saying Clemson's going to win the national championship because they don't have that stud dude who can take over a game night in and night out for a couple of weeks. But I'm not saying they won't give people heartburn either. I like the way the team's built. I love the way they play. And when you play defense the way Clemson does, you always have a shot. That's not a cliche. That's a hard, fast truth. Nobody will deny that. The ball won't always go in, but you can always play defense. And it's no coincidence that is what the vast majority of Clemson practices are centered around. They're around defense. Gritty, hard-nosed, all-in defense. Play like your hair's on fire. Again, NC State headed to Clemson on Tuesday. Will they be able to keep this momentum going, get that win streak up to 10, and keep elevating the ACC along the way? And I mentioned it earlier, and before we close, I think it's worth taking note. Here's the best way to define the way the ACC has flipped the script. The SEC last year, or SEC rather, historical season by all accounts. Boatload of teams going into the NCAA tournament. I think they got 12, maybe more, 14 into the NCAA tournament. Went 14-2 in the ACC SEC Challenge. This time around going 7-9. Now the SEC still won that event, but they narrowed that margin significantly from 12 games to 2. That in and of itself shows progress. And I like Dave pointing out about the influx of new coaches, how that's changed things in the ACC. Go back a decade and look at how different it was. How many Hall of Famers you had? Mike Krzyzewski, Roy Williams, Jim Boeheim, Rick Pitino. You had Leonard Hamilton cooking at Florida State. You still had Jimmy Boeheim at Miami. Mike Bray at Notre Dame. Did a fantastic job at Notre Dame. And there's some Tony Bennett at Virginia, even though he's part of the younger ones, and he was still yet to really hit that pinnacle of his career. But you get what I'm saying. There's been so much change now on the coaching staffs that it's really jumbled things up, but at the same time, it's given it a burst of energy, a shot of adrenaline that's helped some of these teams who've had maybe some doldrums over the last few years go up a notch to elevate themselves. Miami looks fantastic, a far cry from what they did during Jim Boeheim's last days. 15-3 right now, 4-1 in the conference. NC State, 12-6 under Will Wade. Stumbled their foot a couple of times, but still trending in the right direction. And, of course, we've seen what Pat Kelsey's doing at Louisville. Maybe a bit subpar right now, 13-5, but still much better shape than they were under Kenny Payne. So it's a good time to be buying ACC basketball stock again. But a lot of season remains. A lot of games remain to be played. And a whole lot left to be sorted out. That's it for the Scott Hamilton Show. I want to thank Dave Cobb, our friend from CBS Sports, stopping by. Remember to subscribe, like, follow, whatever you do with these sorts of things with regards to podcast. I'm asking you to do it. Hit me up. Let me know what kind of content you want. Do you have questions, complaints, whatever? Let me know. Let me know what you want to see. Let me know what you'd like to dive into. I'll give it a shot. And don't forget to hit me up on social media. You can find me at Scott H. Sports. Otherwise, until next time, hey, everybody be safe. We'll see you.